sleepy juice.
I deserve to be lazy.
We are like God. Hey guys, welcome to another episode, another week of West Wednesday. This is another time when Taylor copies my hair and we talk about Jesus.
Guys, let's take a vote. Who wore it better?
Who wore it better? Taylor, who's had this hair her whole entire life, and that's the only style she knows, or me, who's learning on the fly. So today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and we're talking about Sabbath. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Bailey has a lot of favorite topics. I'll just point that out.
I love Jesus, so I guess it means I have favorite topics about Jesus. I don't know. We're talking about Sabbath. And before we get there, I want to talk about something that I have very little knowledge on, and I hope you have more knowledge than me. But so I'm gonna give a basic outline of what this is, and then you can use whatever scientific lingo you know, okay?
Oh, good.
So we're gonna talk about the brain, which I know you love in particular. I think it's your favorite thing to eat. It's like your favorite organ.
I don't have experience eating brain, no. But it is a thing that I do have investment in, especially relation to adolescence, meaning like teenagers and brain development.
Yeah. And I think what I want to talk about today is the brain in the midst of sleep. Now, I want to preface, I know very, very little. I just know things that people have told me, and I believe because they sound legit, but it matters a lot for today. The main thing I want to walk into that I've been told my whole entire life is that there's two stages of sleep. There's like this light sleep that you get like 2 hours into your, like less than 2 hours into your sleep, and it's very light, like you're aware of what's happening around you. I could like snap and you'd be asleep, but I could snap and you like wake up because you'd hear everything around you. After those 2 hours or whatever that is for you, you go into the stage that I know is like deep sleep. Now, the only importance about deep sleep that I think that matters and I actually care about is that in deep sleep, there is this like juice. I think it's like sleepy juice. Maybe some sort of toxin.
That sounds like a very scientific term, Bailey.
It's like sleepy juice, but get this. So what this does when you're in this deep sleep is this juice comes in and it washes all the toxins from your brain. Okay, and it like cleanses it and gets ready for the next day. The important part about it is if you aren't in this deep sleep for a long enough time, then you don't wake up ready for the day. You are not emotionally ready, you are not physically ready, you are tired, you are exhausted.
Don't wake me. Don't wake me up.
If you didn't get enough of this sleepy juice. And also, Ryan made this point while we were talking about this, but like, if you wake up whenever that process isn't done yet, whenever you're still in that deep sleep, then that makes your day even worse than if you didn't even enter into the deep sleep. So what do you know about sleepy juice and deep sleep and the benefits of it? Do you know anything?
Well, that deep sleep, that REM cycle sleep is where rest is found. Rest, like mental rest, physical rest. And in that, a lot of times, even if you have dreams, it's your brain like working out whatever's happening within it. And so whether or not you have dreams doesn't have to do with that, but that REM cycle is where you get really good sleep. I actually have an example of what comes to my mind of that light sleep. This does not apply to you because you have never, as far as I know, you've never slept on a fall retreat bus. Is that true?
I think that's true.
I think that's true too. But have you ever been, not you, but me, I have slept on a fall retreat bus, and you think that you're sleeping, right? So you have the noise of like the bus moving, and then you have the noise of whatever movie's playing, and you think that you're like resting until you feel someone like about to tap your forehead. Do you know what I'm talking about? And then suddenly you're very aware that someone is standing over you or they're saying your name. I know this is specifically true for people who sleep on the floor and we have to step over them. Anyways, you think you're sleeping, and you are sleeping and you're getting rest, but you're not getting the kind of rest that you get when you're like crashed out in your bed in that deep REM cycle. So there's definitely a difference in the experience that your body has.
What I want to recognize about that though is it is still sleep, right? You can still say I slept for 2 hours on the fall retreat bus. However, you're not near as rested as if you were sleeping at home. And the reason why you're not sleeping as good is because it's not perfect conditions for you to sleep.
Right.
You've got all these things going on. You probably, and if you're in this sleep a lot, right, you don't get into deep sleep very much, you probably didn't do much that day, right? So you you relaxed all day or you didn't get to work hard. And so when you get on this bus to go to fall retreat, there's no reason for you to go to deep sleep. You're not like exhausted. So what we're gonna talk today is Sabbath and the importance of working hard in order to rest well. Just like how we have to work hard during the day, we have to physically use our body to be able to enter into that deep sleep and get real rest. So we're gonna look at a text, and we're gonna look at Matthew 11, 27 through 29. So starting Matthew 11, verse 27, all things have been handed over to me by my Father. This is Jesus talking to his disciples. And he says, and no one knows the Son except for the Father, and no one knows the Father except for the Son, and anyone whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Verse 28, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So one thing that we need to understand when we're understanding this text is that in the Greek language, it's very common to say a statement that has an implied question, and everybody gets, that's how you get from thought A to thought B, okay? So when we read this text in English, we see verse 27, and it's the statement of all things have been handed over to me from the Father. And it ends with, no one knows the Father except for through the Son, and who I choose to reveal the Father to. And in English, we feel like this is a thought A. And then thought B is like a whole new thing. So come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest.
Right.
In the Greek, what we see is that it's this imperative verb, come to me. It's like, so, because we know this statement of nobody gets to the Father except for me, what's next? So how do you get to the implied question is, how do we get to the Son? How do we get the Son to choose to reveal the Father to us? And the answer is to come to me, come to Jesus, all who are labored and heavy laden, and he will give you rest. Okay, he answered the question. How do we get the Son to choose him? We come to Jesus, and then he says, I will give you rest. Again, a statement with an implied question. How do I get that rest? What is that rest gonna look like? What do you know? How can I trust you? And then the answer is verse 29. The way you get the rest is to take my yoke upon you and to learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So these statements all are, it's like point A, point B, point C, and they all work together and they flow. That's important for this text.
The thing that I noticed from your talking is that there is depth of relationship between Jesus and God. He is saying, like, the Father has given me authority, and the only way to get to the Father is through me. And then we switch to 28, and then we see relationship between Jesus and the disciples. And then moving forward in Jesus and us, we see that not transition of relationship, but continuance of relationship. And so I want to be a part of what Jesus is doing, and the disciples do too, because they're sitting there listening to what Jesus is saying. He's not standing and teaching in front of a huge crowd. In their friendship, this is what he's teaching them.
Yeah, and the important thing to recognize as like background information to this text is this is Jesus talking to his disciples. And so this isn't a text for if this is your first time and you like hearing Jesus and you want to know more about him. This isn't the text for you to come to and like learn how to Sabbath. Jesus isn't instructing non-believers. He's instructing people who are following him and committed to him. And so if you are like the disciples and you are following Jesus and you are committing to Jesus and you want to Sabbath more, this is a text that is for you. What stands out to me in this text that in verse 28, Jesus finds it like a thing the disciples would desire to have rest. He says, come to me all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Something that I find is interesting is that Jesus thought this was a big enough deal to bring to them. Like this is a big enough temptation. Like, hey, yeah, if you want rest, you'll come to me. What I want to dive into is why is rest an important thing? And not just in Like, I need the sleep, because we know that rest is more than sleep. It exceeds sleep. So why was rest such a big deal to the disciples that Jesus brought it to them?
Well, I think when we are doing the things we need to be doing, then rest is required as a result, right? So that's part of when we have the moon and then we have the sun. The moon comes up when it's time for us to sleep. So we need physical rest, but then emotional and spiritual rest are different than the physical rest.
Yeah, and I think this is brought out super well in the creation story. We see that over 6 days, God created, and he did a whole lot of things. There was animals and us and waters and formations and lands and sun and moon, all these different kinds of things God created.
Right.
But he set aside a 7th day just for rest. And what I want to recognize is we were created in the image of God. We see this early on in Genesis where he says, look, we've created man in our image. And so we are like God. And in the same way that God needed rest after his work, we also need rest. And of course, we can see this very tangibly in sleeping, right? We need that sleepy juice to be able to be prepared for the next thing.
Right.
However, you also need it in rest from other things. Like whenever you are like hanging out with your friends all the time, you can't be a good friend to them if you don't have rest from them at some point, because then you just get tired and worn out and burned out. It's the same like when you're working with your family. It's the same whenever you're trying to do good at your job. All these different things, you can't spend 100% of your time doing it and without resting, because then you aren't the best version of yourself. You aren't doing it well anymore if you don't rest beforehand.
Well, and I want to go back to what you said about being the image of God. So often we want to be the image of something else, right? We want to be the image of the person we see in the movies, or this musician that we're super into, or even like someone older maybe that we look up to. We want to turn ourselves into the image of that person. But as Christians, we ground ourselves with the foundation, and it takes like daily intentionality of I want to be the image of God because that's how he created me to be. And as I submit to him, which is exactly what he said in that chapter in 11, that's when I become more and more like the image of God.
And it makes sense that as we become, as we grow more and more mature as a Christian, that we become more and more like God. And so in the sense, it makes sense that as we grow and mature as a Christian, we are growing and maturing in our ability to rest and in our ability to Sabbath. And so what I want to recognize is in your everyday life, it's not enough just to like plan to rest at some point and like just let that hopefully come, right? I'm hopefully going to rest at nighttime, or I'm hopefully going to rest on Saturday or whatever it is, because that's not what God did. God made sure he got all of his work done before he rested. And so same with y'all students. Like, I think if you want to start Sabbathing well, you've got to start working well as well.
Working ahead of time.
Working ahead of time. And so what that takes is don't get to Saturday planning to rest just to have your mom say, hey, will you go mow the lawn? Instead, be responsible, be in charge of your own work. And on Monday, say, hey, mom, what are you going to want me to do this week? So that Monday through Friday, you can do the work, and then on Saturday you can rest. Or if you're trying to rest at nighttime, if you're trying to Sabbath at nighttime, say, Mom, what do I need to do during the day so that I don't get to the nighttime? I don't get to after dinner and I'm trying to play video games and I'm trying to hang out and I'm trying to rest, just to have something else to do, just to have more homework that you forgot about. You have to be intentional with your work in order to rest well, in order to Sabbath. And we see that in God. And it's the same thing for you. It's the same thing for me. Resting well requires working well. And I think it's something that's lost in our culture. What does Sabbath look like? So I'm a student who's trying to Sabbath. I'm trying to learn how to rest. And we know this is more than sleep, right? So what is like a practical way to Sabbath? Like, what's your opinion on that?
Well, Sabbath, like you said, is more than rest, and it has a spiritual influence in it. Okay, so you can be sleeping and not have any kind of like spiritual situation. That's why many people have their Sabbath on Sunday when they have, normally you would go to church and worship or have online worship or whatever. But when you are focusing like, God, what would you have for me today? And I want to seek what you have today, God. And so it could mean any of the spiritual disciplines that we've already discussed, but then also just turning down the voice of the world. a little bit. And, that can be turning off social media for the day. That can mean I'm not going to watch movies today if I'm normally a movie person, or whatever that can be. But when I think of if I'm going to seek spiritual rest, then I'm going to turn down the world and I'm going to turn up the voice of God.
I think that's so good. One of the ways that I Sabbath, just to give practical reasons, is I have one day a week where I don't make any decisions. And so I'm a person who generally likes to be in control. I like to have a say if we're going to go do this or go do that or go do that. Emily likes to tell me that I would be totally content if the world revolved around me for a day, which is totally true. However, that gets tiring. I do those things because I want to make sure everything's okay, and I just trust myself to handle everything. So the way that I rest is, instead of trying to handle everything, I intentionally handle nothing. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, of like turning the world down. I try to control things because the pressure of the world. And I take one day out of the week to say, you know what, Lord, like I trust you with all the things. I don't care where we eat today. I don't care where I run today. I don't care what my family does today. But I'm going to be intentional with doing things that I love and not having to make decisions, so I can rest from that. And then I'm better the next day to make the decisions. Then ask me where you want to go to dinner, and I will tell you Chewy's, and we will go, and it'll be great. And I think it's a very practical way to just turn the world down. I love that vocabulary.
There's also, it takes practice. So when you try it the very first time, it's going to be weird. You got to work it out, and you may not get it perfectly right the first time. But the more you do it, the more you'll understand the heart of God for you in it.
And what I want to notice in that is Sabbathing is very counterculture. And so the culture very much says, go, go, go. There's always someone trying to one-up you. I used to have a coach that would tell me, whenever you're resting, someone else isn't, and they're getting better than you. So it's very counterculture, and it takes trust in the Lord to say, Lord, I know that you have asked me to do these things these 6 days or these times that I've dedicated to work. I'm going to trust that that is enough. And then I'm going to trust that you have put a time in for me to Sabbath. It's very much you and God working together in that, and it's so counterculture. So there is someone watching right now that has refused to Sabbath up to this point because they think Sabbath comes at the sacrifice of work. They think that if they are to Sabbath, they're taking time away from working. And what I want to recognize, I want to speak to you directly, is that Sabbathing doesn't sacrifice work, it fulfills work. And so if you've used this excuse for years or months or days or weeks, whatever your situation is, you no longer have an excuse not to rest. Because if you are working hard, then you deserve the Sabbath, and it fulfills your work. It makes your work better. And so if that is you, that's a word from the Lord for you. And just know that. You have no more excuses not to Sabbath, because it doesn't sacrifice your work, it fulfills it.
There's one more thought that I have, is I think there's two different sides of people. There's the people who think, I have so much to do, I can't take a time to Sabbath, which Bailey just spoke to, right? The Sabbath does not make the work less. But then there's the other side of people that's like, I deserve to be lazy.
Yeah, come on.
I deserve to not have to work that much. And especially as we enter into summer, we've come to this accomplishment of finishing the school year. We're celebrating the fact that we're done with the school year, and now I deserve to be lazy. But that's not true. There is no deserving of being lazy. There's still work to be done. We are created in the image of God, right? And he created for 6 days and then he rested. We just talked about this. And so if you don't have schoolwork to do, what work can you be doing in the midst of not having schoolwork? What are things that you could be doing, Bailey, in that creating?
Yeah, you could do things like mow the lawn. You can clean your bathroom that probably hasn't been cleaned since August. Come on, let's be real. You could do things like you can bake a cookie for your neighbor. You can take things off your parents' plates. There's a level of whenever it comes to summer and you have less things on your plate from school, now it's your time to step up and help out your family and take the burden off their shoulders. Be like Jesus to them and take up their yoke and help them out. And it's lighter for both parties.
And in our discussing this and thinking this out, when you work hard, you finish the day with a sense of accomplishment. And you know that. You've done hard work before, like if you've studied really hard for a test, or if you work really hard on a mission trip and you finish the day, or honestly, even if you go skiing, like snow skiing, or even it's water season. So if you go water skiing all day long, your body is done at the end of the day. It's the same concept of that. It doesn't have to be this like magical thing that happens.
Well, I also want to recognize, we got to give a shout out to Brian for this statement, because, you know, you can at him or whatever. But Adam worked before the fall. I think he said Adam worked pre-fall. But so what that means, though, is like, I think we think a lot of times that work is a product of sin, right? It's like the world sucks, so therefore I have to work. No. When the world was perfect, when sin hadn't entered yet, Adam still worked the ground. His hands were still dirty. There were still tulips growing. There were still peach trees that needed to be picked. Like, Adam worked that ground, and he was designed to do it. And so in reality, laziness isn't like this like good thing to be celebrated. Rather, work is the good thing to be celebrated. If you are working, you are leaning more into who God created you to be than if you were just like lounging around 24/7. So I want to encourage y'all to reach out if you have questions about Sabbath. You guys already know this. We say this, I feel like, every single week, but we are in your corner. Ryan is in your corner. Brian is in your corner. All your leaders, your parents, your family, your pastor, we are in your corner. And so if you have questions about Sabbath, if you have questions about how do I get started, what's a good way to do this, is this actually rest, questions don't help you at all until you reach out with that. And so we are always here. FaceTime us, DM us on Instagram, comment down below, whatever you want to do. But don't just hide your questions to yourself. Reach out, and we are more than willing to come alongside you and walk through Sabbath with you. Remember to finish the work so that you can Sabbath. Have a great week. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share this, send it to all your friends, invite somebody to church, do all the things. Make sure to interact. We like doing life with you, and so do life with us, or we get bored.
Bye, guys.
See you later.